Welcome to Lab 10. Question 1A. In this transaction, they are using money. Transaction for 1B, they are not using money because Bob Dylan records don't circulate like money does. Transaction of 1C, they are using money. The transaction of 1D, they are not using money because it would be very difficult to trade auto detailing services. The transaction for 1E, they are not using money because continental dollars can't be spent like modern day money anymore, even though it used to be money. Question 2A, the monetary base is the currency and total reserves held at the Federal Reserve. 2B, M1 is the currency plus checkable deposits. 2C, M2 is M1 plus savings deposits, money market mutual funds, and small time deposits. For 3A, the money multiplier in this case will be 1 over the reserve ratio, which is going to be 1 over 0.1, which will equal 10. For 3B, banks will want to have a higher reserve ratio because as people visit ATMs more often, they will want to keep more reserves. This will lower the money multiplier.
Or question 4, if the Fed wants to decrease interest rates, they should buy more bonds because this will increase the demand for bonds, thereby increasing the price of bonds, which then increases the interest rate since bond prices and interest rates are inversely proportional. For question 5, we are given that the reserve ratio is 5% or 1 over 20, and the change in reserves is $10 billion. This means that the money multiplier is 20, and the change in money supply is $200 billion. For 5B, we are given that the change in reserves is minus $1,000, and the money multiplier is 5. So the reserve ratio is the inverse of the money multiplier, which is a fifth. And the change in money supply is the money multiplier times the change in reserves, which is minus $5,000. For 5C, we are given a reserve ratio of 100%, which is equal to 1, and a change in reserves of, again, 10 billion. This means that the money multiplier will be 1, which is the inverse of the reserve ratio. And the change in money supply is, again, 10 billion because 1 times the reserve change in reserves. For question 6, in this situation where the reserve ratio is 100%, the money multiplier will be the inverse of that, which is, again, just 1. So the interest rates on bank deposits will probably go down in this case. This is because the bank cannot use any money on loans to make a profit, so it will reduce the amount of money it will give back to the depositor by decreasing interest rates. And for 6C, this will mean that the depositors are more likely to invest in bank alternatives, since their opportunity cost is greater if they invest in bank deposits.
For question 7, it asks if the annual interest rate is 4%, what is the approximate one-day interest rate? So that would just be 4 divided by 365, which is 0.01% interest per day. For part B, it asks how many dollars of interest will the Virginia Community Bank earn for lending this money in one day. So that's the total amount of money lended times the interest rate, which gets you $219.18. And then for C, if they lent out the money earned from interest at the same rate for an entire year, they would earn $3,200 because the money lent each day would be 219, and then times the interest rate for the entire year. For question 8, it asks if the Federal Reserve's Open Market Committee wants to cut the interest rate from 2 to 1.5%, they'll decrease the supply of their reserves, therefore buying bonds, so that will increase the demand and decrease the interest rate. And then for Part B, it says as a result, the banks will tend to loan more money because even though the interest rate will be lower, the demand will be higher, resulting in an increase in total loaned money. And then this will increase the nation's money supply. And then for part C, this is going to increase aggregate demand because the rates on the loans are going to be lower. Therefore, more people are going to want to borrow money. For question 9, it just asks, for part A, it just asks what was the federal fund rate in 2007. So if you look on the graph, it looks like it's around 5.25%. And then for part B, it asks what was the rate around the first week of January 2009. This was right around 0.09%.
Right. So question 10A, it asks if what the monetary base and M1 would be in the case where before Edith deposits her money, and that would be 100 for the monetary base and 100 for M1. And then in the case after she deposits her money, but before Max gets his loan, the monetary base and M1 would still be 0. There'll be no change there. But then after Max collects a loan from the bank, the monetary base will still be the same, but M1 would have increased from 100 to 150. And then for part D, it's given what we can see, it is obvious that the money in the economy was generated from Max's loan. Part D, if the Fed starts accruing interest on reserves, the banks will demand more reserves. And for part B, seeing as the banks will get interest on their reserves, the opportunity cost of making car loans and other types of loans would go up, and so therefore the banks would make fewer loans. And if the banks keep more reserves with the Fed, it means that the reserve ratio will go up, and as a result, due to their relationship, the money multiplier would go down. And then lastly, for the central bank to keep M2 the same, they would have to increase the supply of reserves. So thank you. This has been our lab. This has been our lab number 10. We appreciate you for listening.